Hello everybody, welcome to another watercolor tutorial. We're going to be painting a beautiful winter landscape today. So you can start off with your piece of paper in portrait position, take your mop brush or any larger brush because we're going to be covering the top 2/3 in a layer of water. So I'm going to start about 1/3 way up, I would say, and I'm going to tint my my brush just a tiny bit with some black. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to see where I've painted, and it's a bit hard to do when you can't see. So the rest, and it's okay if it's a little darker than this because we're going to be adding a bunch of black watercolor to it anyways, so not to worry. You just want to make sure that you apply a nice even layer of water to that top 2/3, being careful to avoid any pools of water. You want it to be nice and even all the way across. So I think that is about good. I'm just gonna take some paper here and dry the back. There we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do, and this works really well if you have cotton paper. If you don't have cotton paper, that's okay, like any paper will do, but I mean, cotton just takes the cake. And I'm taking a bunch of black watercolor here. I'm gonna tilt my piece of paper downwards, and you've seen me doing this in a couple of tutorials, and we're painting that bottom or the start of our wash that we painted. We just want to paint it all the way across, and you can see how that watercolor just beautifully starts to spread upwards, and that's exactly what we want to happen. So I'm helping it along in some areas, but this stringy effect over here, like this super thin lines, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what we want, rather than these kind of blotchy formations over here. That's why I'm trying to, I'm dipping my paintbrush in water and just trying to fix that a little bit. Okay. You can keep holding your piece of paper like this until you're happy with how it has spread out. But that looks quite nice. I kind of wish it went up a little bit more here, but now I'm scared to go back because I can see that it's half dry down there. So I'm gonna leave it. I have learned from experience not to mess with or tinker with things too much, because then you really just mess up a beautiful painting. So now the other thing we want to do while we're waiting for this section to dry, we can, because this bottom part is going to be snow, but we want to keep it mainly white. So I just want to add some gray accents so it looks like there's something there. We're gonna have people walking towards the horizon line, so this is gonna be our focal point. I'm gonna have just kind of wisps like this, and I'm gonna have those wisps coming out a little bit. And then I want to fade them out. I know it looks a little bit blotchy on the bottom. That's okay. It's not too big of a deal. Ooh, see, this is what I wanted to avoid. This is not ideal, what's happening here. So since it happened there, I'm just gonna let it happen everywhere else. But I think it only happened there because that was not dry yet. But that's okay. You know what? It adds to the painting. It's fine. So I've kind of spread out my original highlights. So I'm going to add them back in. My snow wisps, if you will. So that's all right. Okay, we are going to let this completely dry because we are going to be adding some foreground details and we don't want them to bleed into our beautiful creation over here. So this should be dry. What we're going to do is paint on top of this horizon thing that we painted earlier. We're going to paint a bunch of little trees coming through. So you can go ahead and take your black watercolor and you can water it down quite a bit. So you want to paint these details thinly. And it's just going to be a bunch of trees that are intertwined with one another, like the branches are all intertwined, and that's why you're painting them very close together and very thin. You can paint some pine trees as well if you want to fill in some of the larger gaps. That's what I like doing a lot of the time because they're easy to paint. If you have too much water on your brush, that's what happens here. It gets really thick and you don't want to paint them on that thick. So what I'm doing is I'm painting a bunch of vertical lines and then spanning some horizontal and diagonal lines across those groups to help fill in some of that space. Actually, what I'm doing now seems to work too. You just kind of go back and forth with your paintbrush, but you have to be careful that you're very light, like your brush strokes are very gentle. And because we painted that background earlier, like that when we tilted the piece of paper up, it already created a background wash for us to work off of. So we don't have to, if there was no color there, these lines would be very distinct and it wouldn't look like it's very far away and it's very dense. Like it would be a lot of effort. And we don't want to put in a lot of effort. I'm just adding a pine tree in the mix here because there was a very nice, long, opportunistic background extension there. but I am going to paint those vertical lines on top of it. And then you can just kind of cross hatch a little bit. There we go. This over here was a little bit too dense and too dark. Not dense. It was too dark. So I'm gonna try and go over and fix it a little bit. Not much luck. That's okay. So because we painted this on very light, it's most likely already dry, which is great. But I think I kind of wish that I painted these a little bit taller. So I'm gonna go back and just extend these just a tiny bit. That's a little bit better. So it's mostly dry because, again, we painted it on very light, so I'm not going to wait too long for that to dry. Instead, I'm going to pick up very black watercolor with very little water, and I'm going to be painting on the foreground trees that are going to really make this whole thing come to life, hopefully. Now, one thing that I want to do, which is a little bit risky, I'm going to do it anyway, is take a little bit of black and just apply it to my sky. So I'm going to try and fade it out so that it kind of blends in with the color of the paper. So I'm trying to create kind of a bit of a cloudy sky by doing this, so that when I paint my trees, they don't extend into whiteness. So that's a bit better, I think. So because I painted on that sky, I am going to let this dry before I paint the foreground details. So that should be dry. And again, as I said earlier, this is kind of my focal point. Like in hindsight, I should have painted this part a little bit more open to make it look like people are walking into a pathway or something, but that's hindsight, so whatever. Hopefully the trees will cover it up. So I'm going to start my first tree around here, I believe, and it's going to extend all the way up. I'm going to have it split. And you can have a few branches coming off of these trees, they extend all the way up past your piece of paper. And I'm just adding thin lines, or I should say a lot more branches, extending off of the little branches that we already painted, because I want to make it look very full. We can always add more of these tiny thin branches in later. I just want to paint the next tree, so I'm just going to paint it beside this one, sort of in the same shape. It's going to look very similar. Okay, so that's all right. The way that that is, we are going to paint the next set of trees. These ones are going to be closer to the viewer, so you want to paint them darker than these ones if possible, because we already painted them quite dark. So I'm going to have them coming from here this time. So that one is a little bit darker, which is great. And then while I'm at it, I'll paint the next one in the mix over here, I think. I'm going to have another tree over here. I don't want them to look completely symmetrical. They don't have to be. I am going to add just, I say that now, one tree for now on this side. Okay, that's good the way it is. Now the stumps of my trees, they're, you know, just kind of floating there. We want to make them look just a tad more realistic. So I'm going to add a couple of things. The first thing I'm going to add is just a shadow coming from them. Okay, and then the other thing, I'm gonna just adjust these a little bit. Okay, and then the other thing I want to do, I'm going to take my quadruple zero brush here and flick on these little I'm gonna go a little bit closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm gonna flick on these little grass strands just growing from the base of the tree and just kind of around the area. You don't have to do this part, but it does add something to the painting, just some really fine details. I'm always up for that. Like this, okay. Gonna zoom back out. And okay, there's a couple more things that I want to add. One is some darker, again, those same kind of grassy foliage patches that start close to the horizon and then extend beyond it in these beautiful dark strands. And I'm gonna do that on both sides, like that. The other thing I want to do is add some figures, like people walking in the distance. So I'm gonna have the ones that are really far away, don't really have to look too precise. I'm gonna have one a little bit closer. And then one even closer. That kind of looks like he's on a horse. I like that. So I'm gonna go with that. Little horsey. Okay. I'm thinking maybe one more, like really, really close up, or will that ruin it? I'm gonna try. So his head is gonna be here. He's gonna come down like this. He's gonna be on a nice horse. So the legs are gonna come down like that, and then the arm is going to be tucked in like this. And then the legs of the horse are gonna come down. Like this. Okay. That doesn't look bad. It could be a pear-shaped person, or it could be a horse, a person on a horse. You never know. You never know. So, okay, the last thing that I want to add, oh, actually, sorry, I keep saying that, but our horses need to have some shadow as well. and our people. I'm almost tempted to leave the shadow like that. I like how that looks. But it's a little bit dark for my liking. So I'm just trying to blend it out. Okay. All right, next, this might be the last thing I'm gonna do, but I'm going to take white acrylic paint. You can use white gouache, or if you have acrylic paint, or even whiteout will work in a pinch. And we're gonna add some snowy features. So I'm gonna grab my white acrylic paint, and I'm just gonna add these features to the corners of my branches, and just in the areas where the branches face a little bit more horizontal than they do vertical. And my trees are quite vertical, so I'm not gonna have too many of these details, but I do want to add some. I am adding some just to the kind of base area of the tree. And then I'm going to water down my paintbrush just a tad and pick up a bit of that acrylic paint, and then I'm going to make it snow on my painting. So I'm concentrating particularly where there is the most black so you can actually see the snow, because if I flick it right on here or here, you won't see it. So right kind of in the horizon area where we painted those shadows earlier, that's what we want to do. Now, we still want there to seem like there's snow up in the trees. So you can take some of that acrylic paint and just dab it on with a paintbrush as well on the trunks of the trees and just in random places. So you have the illusion of a snowfall. Okay, and that is basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed this beautiful snowy landscape tutorial. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit like on this video, and I will see you in the next one.